Why is sales broken today?
I mean, truly, it's really just because of the tradition of what sales was in the 80s and 90s from the perspective of that people were making money. Capitalism was taking over the United States even more so than it had before at that point in our history here. And across the world too. It was becoming a very popular trend. You know, if you look at it from that perspective, just the realistic side of it, it's very easy to see why it got to where it was and why it is the way it is now. Because again, when we set a tradition or we set a standard or we say, hey, this is the new way to do it, and we see all these people making millions of dollars, meanwhile, we forget to ask the people that were paying them whether or not they even like the person in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But once you start to learn those things and you start to hear when you walk in the front door as a copier person, negativity being thrown at you, and you think to yourself, what do you mean? Like, why so negative? You don't even know me. And then they start to unload on you. Oh, well, 5 years ago, here's what happened. And 3 years ago, here's what happened. And the last time we upgraded a piece of equipment, here's what happened. And again, then we can take the puzzle pieces of this bigger picture and put it all together and say, it's not one person's fault. It's just the traditions in which, my father, had to persevere through, and his grandfather had to, his father had to persevere through, right? It's just that concept. It's just basic human history unfolding before our eyes.
Part of the opening video on your website has you, it's got this cool little spreadsheet, or not spreadsheet, a sheet of check marks of things that people assume they have to get through for sales, push people through this process,
Right.
Can you unpack that for a second? Because that sounded very kind of, I've not seen the movie, but Wolf of Wall Street, and I've seen the clips go around. I assume that's where you're coming from, is just dumping that whole mindset.
Yeah, if you've been in any type of very strict corporate culture when it comes to sales, outside sales, then you understand when that shows up in the video, you're like, dude, yeah. And we're super sarcastic. I think somewhere in the checklist it says like make 10,000 mindless calls or mind-numbing calls, something like that. Right? But again, you have to be sarcastic with these subjects in most cases to get your point across, because people say, well, you can't do 10 calls a day and be successful, which I definitely disagree with. But at the same time, I understand where they're coming from. And so now it's an argument. and it's also one that the person on the other side has a valid point toward. But again, what we're trying to help people to see is this bigger picture. It's not about the 10 calls or the 150 calls. It's about the thought process and the mindset behind it. Why are you making these calls? Why are you doing these activities? Are you just trying to make a commission and to hit the KPIs that are the standard that keep you, again, under the roof, in the culture and on the path, the lifestyle that you've put yourself in, right? Because it's this concept of, how do I not lose my job day in and day out as a salesperson? Yeah. We have to stop thinking like that, because that's a survivalist mindset and that's a scarcity mindset. We need abundance.
Let's take a step back now. Your story, and I'll reference your bio because it's a brilliant one on LinkedIn. You talk about your father's impact on you and how that inspired you to go a certain way and reinvent things within your own copier process and so on. And then you went on to create this whole new program. Can you talk us through some of your story and what it is that inspired you? Like maybe it was a moment or a day or something or a person to change your direction.
Yeah. It was, to be quite frank, it was my existence, my upbringing, right? The culture that my dad had built, I saw my dad do things so much differently than others. And I'm not talking about just in sales. I'm talking about, you're driving down the road and you see somebody on the side of it with their thumb out. They have no shoes. They got a backpack on. Their hair's long. They look grimy. You've got 2 kids in the car. You don't stop. The majority of America doesn't stop. The majority of the world doesn't stop. My dad would stop. It never mattered the situation or the circumstance. If somebody needed help, my father was the first one to lay down and say, how can I be the one to do that for you? And not for recognition or money or fame, which again, like that, I've said this before on podcasts and in interviews where that used to make me mad, because I always thought people need to see what you've done. You deserve to be recognized for your works in the community. But my dad never wanted those things. And not to deviate too much, but this is the mindset. If you want to understand me better, let me tell you like this. When I played music, and we would get on a stage to play in front of a crowd, I was never comfortable. Okay. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. That I was never comfortable. I was up on in this platform with these 5 men that I shared the stage with, looking down and out at people. Where I preferred when we would play a Legion Hall or a Moose Lodge, or Order of the Elks, somewhere in the United States where there was no stage, and we would play on the floor and people were right in front of you. You could touch and feel and be on the same grounds and the same level as them. And I know it's a crazy thought to sit back and take that in deeply. But I'm asking people that are listening to do that, because that's how you will understand me and my upbringing and why it is that I decided one day that I'm just going to do it different, not for the sake of it, but for the good of my community, for the betterment of my community.
So in recreating that, you've created an entire new sales rebellion. And if you haven't, please check out the video on the sales. Is it salesrebellion.com?
Yes,
yeah.
salesrebellion.com.
Check out the video. It will have you grinning from ear to ear and running for that email sign up. I know I did within 10 seconds. But talk to me about your reason process and then how you radically educate somebody.
Yes. Sure. Absolutely, dude. So reason is to radically educate and share one's narrative. It's the concept of pitching using storytelling methodology. So it's not really pitching anymore. It's just a conversation and using the oldest form of communication that man has ever known, stories, right? And so it's just the next level, essentially. And really, it's what a lot of people have been doing successfully in sales that don't get the credit they deserve in the first place. If I can think of any salesperson that's ever just done a bang-up job in the process with me when I'm buying something, or even my mentors, like my father as well, I think about this storytelling methodology. I think about, and maybe sometimes people do it and they're not mindful of it even, but it just naturally happens, which again, I just think that that's our basic inherent human nature coming forth. And so reason takes things back to the root of what communication looks like. And so the first two, R and E, stand for radically educate. A is attention, S is story, O is outline, and N is nuanced. So that's the big picture breakdown of the curriculum that we've created. So again, help people to see the pitch from a different perspective. If you're an SDR and you're making 150 calls a day or even 50 calls a day, this is the way to infiltrate the boring, stale, monotonous pitch that you're giving and still make your boss happy and excited, because what they hear, what we'll hear is synergy. And people, if they're still telling you no, they're not hanging up on you, at least, right? That whole concept, it's this thing of, look, there is no silver bullet. I don't care what people say, but there is definitely a better way to do it. There's a better way to take a no. There's a way to get a no faster, more efficiently, and without, because when someone hangs up on you, your boss says, call him back in a week. But when someone says, you know what, that was a great pitch, but we use our brother-in-law and we're never going to do business with you. But thank you for taking the time to call me, right? I mean, who wouldn't want something like that? And so for me, back in 2010, that's what I decided to start to build for myself. And by 2012, I had put this whole process together, and it was just like clockwork for me, in and out, whether it was through the door or on the phone. But it all starts with this radical education piece, which again, it's a workflow, and the radical education piece is a drop piece. That's how we define it. So if you want to talk about DIY, I had one in particular. I talk about my crumpled letter a lot, right? And it was actually a real estate method that I had learned from a friend in real estate. And if you Google crumpled letter real estate, you'll see back to 2004, the way that I kind of learned it. I took it and I adapted and molded it into my own concept. And there's other sales organizations that use it as well too, but which is, the little known secret, right? But let's let the secrets out of the bag. That's what I say. But I made a version of it. I have 4 versions of the DIY letters. Okay. There's the crumpled, there's the pre-burnt, there's the letter traveled around the world, and there's the coffee stain letter. My favorite is the coffee stain. I used to take and square up a letter to the size of a coaster. And I would literally take a coffee mug and I would put a stain on the top of this thing. And I would write, please unfold and read. Right. And so people would open this massive amount of curiosity. This is a cold call. Who dropped this off? What the hell is this? Like these are the things going through people's head, instead of them picking up the phone and going, hello, right? Knowing that you're a solicitor, knowing they're going to hang up on you in the first place. You create synergy in those moments and impact in those moments. So very thought out letter that we send to somebody that's inside of that coffee stain letter. And that's where the secret sauce is, right? The things that if people follow me, they get into my curriculum, they learn these things, they'll understand the mindset behind it, because it's really a mindset. But you can do that for free, right, Dominic? Like that's the idea. It's like you can do that in your home and at your office. Just grab the printer, make 50 copies of this thing that you wrote up, take some time, drink a little coffee in the interim,
Yeah.
and go and impact your community.
I love that. You talk about how your sales territory is your community. You're not cultivating, or you're not just running around dumping stuff off and then, sort of that hit and run mentality. It's a different shift. You're trying to cultivate a community. And I imagine that then
Right.
feeds into your pipeline is alive. Can you spend a minute just talking about what does that mean? How is your pipeline living the way that you approach it?
Yeah. So the idea is that the traditional funnel or pipeline, we should say, is it's rusted, it's leaking, it's outdated, bro. And most of the people that are in it, they're off a list. You call and you ask for Margaret, and they say, Margaret hasn't worked here in 15 years, right? I mean, that's the traditional pipeline looks like that. You get a list, you start to call people, you put them in the funnel, you find your 30, 60, 90, 120, you shove them through to the bottom. And I just don't believe in that process. But I believe in that naturally being a process, right, more than anything. But what I also believe in is that there's people that are going to buy from you in 2 years. There's people that are going to buy from you in 5 years. There's people that are going to buy from you in 10 years. If you don't have this long game approach to the beginning of your sales career, in 2 or 3 years, you'll be burnt out thinking to yourself, I have to keep doing this over and over. I have to keep doing these cycles and these systems. So for me, it was always inside of the living pipeline that I've created. And at the time that I was the copier warrior, what my focus was that I was looking for a yes or a no, a relationship, good or bad. Never indifferent. I was not looking to be indifferent to people. And so even if I could get somebody to say not interested, I have a branch inside of my living pipeline that is for those people, that I then, again, nuance a process and healthily indoctrinate them in a very positive way to want to be a part of my culture, or just to enjoy what I'm doing with them and not be pissed off that I'm calling them or emailing them or cold calling them in the first place. Right. So again, just something different, a different perspective, and recognizing that these are not deals. These are people that make decisions. And then the best part being that if you cultivate a relationship with somebody, especially the receptionist or somebody that makes the decision in the C-suite, there's an average tenure at each vertical, each position, right? The receptionist is somewhere around 2 years, right? So let's say that the receptionist likes you. She moves on to another location, someplace you can't get into, and you can go and call on her over there as well too. So it's this again, snowball effect, right? This buildup, these relationships that can carry over and that can cause more success. But you have to put time and energy into it, right? And that's why most people don't like this stuff. They don't want anything to do with it, because especially sales leaders, management VPs, that C-suite of leadership, the old school methodology and mentality of them, at least, so anybody listening that's in that suite and that's, from the 80s and 90s thinking to themselves, I called every day and made this success, like that, it's dead, guys. Like it's dead from the perspective of the success that you could be having. I wrote millions of dollars in copier sales, not doing that. Right. Yeah. So why not work hard while still creating quality at the same time, right? And being focused on quality over quantity, right? But again, having this ethic, this hard work ethic inside of that, and stepping outside the box, being yourself, being authentic, moving and impacting the people around you, right? That's the idea behind it.
For sure. It takes a level of emotional investment that a lot of people aren't prepared to do. I mean, that's what it takes to be a friend, right? As opposed to just, like a cold caller. Nope. Okay. And then you move on. Building that friendship, for the long term. Yes, it's a longer haul, but hey, it pays off in loyalty, right? Can you give us one actionable tip? Maybe like a radically educating idea, something that people can start implementing. And I know you referenced maybe that coffee cup thing. If you're somebody who's working, say, remotely, and you aren't able to walk in to your target's office or somebody like that, and you're on LinkedIn or able to do it online, what's something that you would recommend?
I'm going to read you this text right here. This is from one of my students that sent me a text the other day and said exactly this. And he's an SDR. He's an AE and an SDR. He's kind of a hybrid role. But this is what he's in Florida. He said, got offered a job in Alabama today because of the crumpled letter. Evidently half the company was talking about me and the letter. So the company has over 200 employees. And so they were all looking at my profile as well too. So he's got like massive hits on his profile. He's getting offered a job. And then he ended it with this. I mailed the letter. Okay. So the other thing is too, is that you have to realize is that a lot of people think that if I put the letter in the mail, somebody will read it as opposed to dropping it off. And that's not the case. Anything that comes in from an email to a letter through snail mail is junk if they don't know who it's from and they don't recognize it. If it shows up in a FedEx box, it's junk. But think about this. What if it shows up in an Amazon box, right? Then it's like to every man that's listening right there that has a wife, your wife loves Amazon, right? Like, I mean, that's just the way it is. I like Amazon too, right? Yeah. I can't even tell you how many Amazon boxes that show up to my house. So if that came to my office, I would absolutely open it, right? I probably wouldn't even check to see where it was from, right? But also the concept of, you know, like this particular individual that I'm talking about, he sends the letters. They come in these envelopes that get your attention, okay? Now, that's about the most I'll say, because the thing is here is that, like, what I like to do with my students as well too is not to give them specific directions, but to have a conversation that opens their mind and to allow them to create that success for themselves, and not to try and mimic exactly what I've done to be successful, because it's important that their authenticity, that everybody listening, that your authenticity shows up in that envelope and in that letter, and not just something you learned from Dale at the Sales Rebellion, right?